Now, as much to my clan's dismay, Strikers is still going. Oh my god. Another Striker video. Can't believe I'm doing this. Okay, right. First things first, I've never died so much trying to just get a simple recording for a video, just because the damage of Strikers just isn't there. Like, I've followed people's advice, I've followed the guides, I've followed the YouTube videos, and yeah, pretty much the only decent bit of utility you can actually get going out of Strikers is using the Dod-Regnbue backpack for perfect clutch, and that is a rather interesting item to try and find. I still don't have a good one. The one I'm using is crit damage and armor regen, because that's just the best one I have. And yeah. Anyway, this video is to sort of like go over a few various DPS Striker builds. It's sort of like let's talk DPS part 2 and actually look into Strikers itself. And there's 3 issues. One, we've all been doing it wrong, including me. And there's 2 builds going around at the moment which are absolutely breaking my soul. So, first point, we've all been doing it wrong. Due to the way in which the multipliers stack on top of each other, you are actually far, far, far better off using a lower fire rate weapon. The absolute best for it is actually the AKM. Although the DPS will be lower, with my Shield Splinter and FAMAS I get to about 11 to 12 million DPS, and then using an AKM I scrape just about into about 8 million. However, the time to kill is so much better on a lower fire rate, higher damage weapon, just because of the way the multipliers stack on top of each other. So realistically, if you're wanting to get the most optimal damage out of Strikers, you kind of want to use something like the ACR. Like, it is just so much better. Like, optimally it is so much better, because DPS doesn't translate well in this game. The thing you want to look at is time to kill, how quick you can kill an enemy. DPS in this game does not correlate to that for some bizarre reason. It should, but it doesn't. So you want the lowest time to kill. And the best weapons for that I have figured so far are the AKM is the best, but that's still going to be quite inaccurate. So the ACR and the MK16 are literally your best bets. Anyway, now we've got that out of the way, honestly, just trust me on it, okay? They are just optimally so much better. Anyway, right, there are 2 rather weird builds going around. One of them is this, or at least a variant of this. 4-piece Strikers, Devil's Due, Contractor's Glove, Bullet King. I am missing a mod on that just because there's really not too much point actually talking about this. Has anyone ever heard the expression, polish a turd, it's still a turd? Bullet King is mathematically the lowest damaging exotic LMG, and it's like in the bottom 3 lowest damaging weapons in the entire game. People just seem to think that because you don't have to reload, it counts as more DPS. I'm not trying to tell people how to play. Absolutely, I am an advocate for play your way. I just don't feel everyone has all the correct info. So if you want to run this, by all means, go nuts. Just don't think that you're actually really doing anything. Like, yeah, it's kind of sad how much people put out crap and then don't realise what they're doing. A good alternative would actually be to run the RPK or the L86. The L86 is bullet for bullet the highest DPS LMG in the game. The RPK can go slightly above just because it has a higher, larger magazine. Even things like the M60, they have to get through about 80 rounds of their magazine just to keep up with the 50 rounds in the L86. And the L86 has got like a 2.10 second reload, and the M60's like near enough 5 seconds. So yeah, you do the math, figure out what one does more damage. Let me know. I can tell you now it's the L86. Now another one is this, pretty much the exact same setup apart from we're using Pestilence, and I could not express the level of stupid in this build. Like, absolutely categorically, do not, under any circumstances, I don't care if it's your fucking favourite YouTuber's girlfriend's husband's wife dog that tells you to do this. At minimum, 42% of Pestilence's damage comes from that debuff. Strikers does 0. Like nothing. Nada. Not a damn thing to increase that debuff. So you've literally made what is potentially one of the strongest, well, it is the most powerful LMG, but only because of that debuff. The moment you remove that debuff and work off of its weapon damage, which is essentially what Strikers does, yes, you're still going to get the debuff, but it's not going to be anywhere near as much. The moment you try and build Pestilence for its bullet damage, you essentially make it worse than Bullet King, which is a hell of a feat. Like, I applaud that commitment to trying to do absolutely terrible. Like, yeah. Those two builds, no. Please just don't. So if we're going to talk DPS builds that actually work, this is one if you're willing to be an absolute masochist. Annoyingly, with builds like this, you need Perfect Clutch because that is literally your only utility, which is the biggest, absolute biggest issue you face with Strikers. This will actually do a surprisingly large amount of damage at max stacks. Like, honestly, it's kind of stupid. Not quite as good as Pristine Example, but it's certainly up there and is comparable to most meta sort of perfect last cannon builds. The only issue is there is a ramp up. Whilst at max stacks, your multipliers will basically multiply together and you will do a rather surprisingly large and shocking amount of damage. Again, headshots are going to have to kind of be a thing, but I personally wouldn't recommend the build because where you're running perfect last cannon, it's an absolute struggle just to keep up with the amount of crits you need for clutch. On the plus side, we are actually at max crit, 60%, and we're at 122% critical hit damage. Now honestly, this is actually one of my favourite Strikers setup to run. It's a little bit more annoying to sort of get going because it is only a 600 RPM weapon. You do have to be in close range and you are absolutely dependent on Perfect Bloodsucker, which is why we go for, well, Liquid Engineer for the Perfect Bloodsucker, as it's an extra 2% over armor essentially. The TTK on this is absolutely ridiculous. There was one point when running around with this, when testing out a load of different Strikers build, found a world named Elite and with Intimidate active and was pretty much about halfway on my Striker stacks. I think I got for about 22 rounds before he just disappeared into oblivion. Probably quite niche and definitely going to be better to run in a group just to keep some of the aggro off you, but that is just an idea. Now, I did have one comment on one of my previous videos saying that if you run Strikers the same way you run Hunters, you're uneducated in the way Strikers works because you need to use the chest piece. Now, on that, I kind of want to say it's true-ish. Simply because the way Strikers actually works, it isn't actually a 25% multiplier. It's closer to about 28. Because it doesn't go 0.5 plus 0.5, you've now got a 1% amplified. It's 0.5 times 0.5, and it does that for every stack. Now, if you do that, you actually get to about 28%, not 25%. Adding in the chest puts you at like 34 or 38%, I can't quite remember. And if you're using the chest and the backpack, it goes to like a 64%. The problem is with using the chest or the backpack is you actually give up so many other things. because you've only got your core attribute, your weapon damage, or however you want to roll it afterwards, you can then do your sub attribute, and then you've got a mod. So you are compromising something somewhere, which is where a lot of the green builds actually sort of fall short. There are a few exceptions, things like Hunter's Fury, because Hunter's Fury is just a monster. But the overall effect of strikers in terms of DPS is absolutely overly reliant on those stacks. And there are some easy ways to get stacks. You might have seen at certain points I went up to the enemies with a shotgun, and that will pretty much put my stacks at max pretty damn quick. However, you can't sustain that. The stacks are very, very difficult to sustain, especially with how squishy you are, because the only thing you have for utility is something like clutch or your player skill, essentially. And if you can't maintain it, you are quite simply better off running a high-end build. And I can pretty much guarantee that 99% of players out there cannot maintain it. So, yeah, read into that what you will. This build is quite unique. We are using the Striker's chest, as aforementioned, as well as Contractor's gloves, and we're using an Alps backpack for the repair skill. We've rolled it all completely red with Vigilance. The repair skill is really handy if you're running a drone, which is what I actually do recommend. You basically, with every Striker's build, you'll need a way in which you can survive, which is annoying. But it does work. Now with the chest, we do get a lovely, what the hell happened there? I like jumped through the wall. We get a lovely 64% multiplier, which is, well, it's not really 64%, we get a times 64 multiplier, which is quite nice. We're basically essentially getting focus, but without the focus. I just kind of wish it wasn't on 4-piece strikers. But yeah, in case you've not figured out, like, the biggest issue with strikers, well, there's three really, is, well, four. One is there's so much bad crap information and builds going around that just don't work or are just stupid. So that's one. Two, the ramp up. There are easy ways to get it up. Viagra. Or an ACS 12. I'd recommend using the ACS 12. Pretty sure throwing Viagra at your console or your PC is not going to do much for strikers. But to get it up is quite easy. To get the stacks up is quite easy. To maintain them is the difficult part. I keep hearing people go, oh yeah, just shoot this and this and this. And it's just like, well, that's great. Where is it? I can't shoot this car. If I could shoot this car and get my stacks up, that'd be brilliant. But I can't. So, yeah. And then you're compromising so much in your build as well. Like, you are literally relying completely on those stacks to do damage, because your crit chance will be like, you can get it to, like, with certain weapons and setups, you can get it to 60%. But most of the time you can be wandering around 50% critical hit chance and 117% critical hit damage. That's sort of like the rough area. Which is, if you were to look at that, any other like average DPS build, most people would be like, that's not a DPS build, that's like barely a hybrid. Like, what the hell? And then the final one is just, you lose so much utility. Like, I am hanging out for Dod City Holster right now. Potentially could put it in, but there wouldn't be too much point. Like, your survivability comes literally from you either trying to kill things quicker than they can kill you, which, unless you've got some god tier secret on how to keep those stacks up and going, you don't. And then it's skills, so you've then got to find a way to buff your skills all through talents. And with talents, there's not really a lot of solid options anymore. If clutch was still the way it used to be, then I would say absolutely run clutch, get yourself a friggin' vector and go nuts. But we can't even do that anymore. So we're kind of limited on how we can actively play strikers. Personally, I feel running 4 pieces is a little bit too much. I kind of feel like there should be a 1, 2 and then 3 piece rather than 2, 3, 4. The way pretty much most other high-end gear sets work, but then they're not really the same as, well, they basically become the same as high-end gear sets. But I do feel particularly with strikers, it either needs like a complete and utter overhaul, like scrap it, start again, or something needs to be done about gear sets in general. There are some really, really good ones out there, but you are lacking in pretty much every other area. Now, if like me you struggle to just get along with strikers, I would like to draw your attention to this, which is hilarious. 4-piece strikers, memento, and then 0Fs. Crit damage and crit chance all over the place. And we're going to use the tsunami just because the perfect pummel was actually really handy here. Now, why we are going for this is simply just due to the fact that one of the quickest and easiest ways to build up your stacks is shotguns. So when you're running strikers, you will lose stacks. It's inevitable. You will always just passively lose stacks. In between fights, you're going to passively lose stacks. The best way to get your damage up is to build your stacks as quick as possible. Shotguns are really handy for this, so why not just make a full-on shotgun build? Tsunami is really handy for this because it can be quite well, it's semi-auto with a decent-ish mag size. And with perfect pummel, the moment you get 2 kills, you get a refill. And you can do some serious damage. And by the time you've got 2 kills, you will be at max stacks. As long as you've got like a good population density, shall we say. So from there, you can near enough keep maximum stacks, perfect pummel constantly activated. And when you're picking up memento stacks, you can then increase your damage further, your armor regen, get a little bit of skill tier going. I do actually typically run Technician with this, despite the fact that it said Gunner in it, just so that I can get a tier for Shield, which is pretty damn handy. As of this moment, I do believe, my personal opinion this part, I personally feel that shotgun builds on strikers are the better way to go. The only issue is they are still not comparable to Hunter's Fury. Although they can do technically more damage on strikers, Hunter's Fury gives you CC, armor regen by 20%, health regen by 100%. There is just so much more utility in Hunter's Fury, basically. And the biggest, or one of the 4 biggest downfalls of strikers is there is 0 utility in that set. So yeah, I don't know, maybe if they added like another affix of like for every stack you get 0, like the same as your damage amplification, but as just armor regen as well. That could be quite handy. I mean, that would essentially equate to about 28% armor regen, which would be quite entertaining, but it would at least open up the build itself, because it's just a mess set. I really just, yeah. And this is going to be the final build that I am showing in this video. You would all be happy to know this might look pretty damn similar to some of you. The only thing that I've changed is I've changed the FAMAS to the ACRE, just because it's a better time to kill. Pristine example, Cheska backpack with vigilance. This currently is, I mean, the assault rifle dependent, but this currently is the only striker setup that is comparable to the current meta, simply just because Pristine example's that stupid. Annoyingly, it does mean you are then relying on 2 stacks, focus as well as strikers, but the damage ramp up with each tick of focus along with getting striker stacks is worthwhile. However, it really shines when getting those headshots. That's basically where all of your damage actually comes from. The only part of the build that I don't particularly like is just the simple fact that you are forced to use that 8x scope. I do know a few people that run it regardless on their builds just because they like it. I for one personally think you are a monster and there's something wrong with you, and how could you do that, and I don't know, just you're a mutant, you're an absolute mutant. I just can't figure out how you do it. I can't play that way, I just can't do it. But that's just me. But as it stands, the highest DPS available for strikers is still using Pristine Example. So, takeaways from this video: strikers is still meh. The utility of it still sucks. There's still a lot of bad information going around about it. The ramp up really does still hurt it, despite the fact that you can get the ramp up pretty quick using a shotgun. Maintaining it then becomes an issue, and you end up in this weird sort of damage trade-off of between maintaining and trying to build it up, and it just becomes a friggin' nightmare. You can use Bullet King if you want, but it's laughable. Don't use Pestilence. It potentially is a bug that strikers, the amplification damage on strikers doesn't affect the Pestilence debuff, Plague of the Outcasts, but for the moment it doesn't. So if you're using Pestilence on strikers, seek help. Like, honestly, it's just, you are directly nerfing yourself by doing that to a hilarious degree. Anyway, this about does it for me. Have fun, good luck, don't die. It's bad for the health.